everybody. This is Rich Hayden with Eagle Home Mortgage, and we're here now for episode 4 of Clear to Closing. I got myself here in Northern Virginia and Matt Kirkland out in Lincoln, Nebraska. Matt, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. Matt Kirkland, Realty Works, Lincoln, Nebraska. Great to see you all again on this episode 4. Looking forward to talking to everybody.
All right. And then we've got special guest, our friend Dave Zadaracki with Keller Williams and the Zadaracki Group out of Alexandria, Virginia. Have known Dave loosely for probably 20 years is when we first introduced. Fell out of touch like so many of us do, and then through the magic of Facebook had a chance to reconnect a little bit, and have seen him do some great things as I've lurked on his social media profiles, and really wanted to try to glean a little bit of knowledge from him, even though we're both local in the Northern Virginia area. For anybody who's watching anywhere, that's like saying, I'm from New York, you're from New York, you must know each other and run into each other all the time. Not so much. I mean, upwards of 5 million people here in the DC area, and you can kind of bump into people, but not too much. So there's just a whole lot of knowledge that Dave can share, and we wanted to try to tap into that and let everybody know what he's got going on. But Matt, why don't you take it from there? And
yeah, Dave, first thing I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is just introduce yourself to everybody. Tell us about yourself, your family, where you went to school. Tell us about your business real quick, and then we'll fire off with some questions.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave. I started in the business in 1992, right out of school, as a mortgage loan officer, and then my career sort of evolved into sales management position in a mortgage company, and then I put together joint ventures between builders, mortgage companies, real estate companies. Did that for a couple of years, and then spun that off, and then we had like a little technology company that provided technology services to mortgage banking call centers. And then sort of, got sick of the travel and employees and all that stuff, and kind of came back to my roots in the residential real estate section. Was a licensed real estate agent in, I want to say 2004, and then became a broker in 2009 or 2010. Had a RE/MAX franchise for a couple of years, then turned that into a boutique, unaffiliated, and now I'm with Keller Williams Realty in Alexandria, primarily because not so much more of anything other than it's a really cost-effective model to run your business platform from. The local people, the local brokerage team, et cetera, here, top rate, first class, really enjoy working with them. So I feel like I found a home. Personally, I'm married, have an awesome wife. She's a total stud, definitely the best of the best, and complete overachiever in life, and did so with my wife. She's phenomenal. She just finished her 5th Ironman in Lake Placid, so that was fun. And then we've got 2 girls, Abby and Paige, who are 10 and 9, and we live in Alexandria City.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So
Sure.
When I was researching you this morning, I found, on Facebook, it said the Zadaracki Group. So what I wanted to ask you is talk about that word group, how you approach your, do you have a team? Is that just for your firm? What does that mean exactly, Zadaracki Group?
So the Zadaracki Group it's me, and then I've got a person who works with me, Amy Goodman. My dad is part of the group, Joe Zadaracki, and then Art Blanda is a new person to the group. And so the way that we work is as a team, but independently, so that one of the things that I think is a challenge with groups is you come in as a consumer and you start working with Fred, who then passes you off to Ted, who then you're working with Mary, and you don't particularly build a shared knowledge base as you're looking at houses, and it's kind of herky-jerky. At least that's my experience with it. And so what our philosophy is that your primary contact person should always be the same person. So that's your go-to person. They share your journey with you. They remember, that dilapidated shack on 1234 Maple Lane. They remember what you liked about 276 Hidden Acre, and then help you figure out how that Rubik's Cube gets solved to find that perfect house at that perfect price. Now, in the background, which the consumer doesn't really see, is that we're working collaboratively and bringing experience and resources to bear so that that agent can provide a first-class experience to the consumer. Our concept is basically service first. We're not growing to just reach an arbitrary number. I'm not trying to sell $100 million a year. I'm just trying to help as many people as I can, one person at a time. If that turned out to be 100 million, great, but it's not the objective.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So continuity is king, is from the client perspective, really giving them that.
Yeah, service first. So personally, I sell, I don't know, 30, 40 houses a year, somewhere in there. But it's high touch. You're talking to me, you call me at 8:30 at night, I answer the phone. Right. It's old school kind of real estate, Saturday morning, let's do it, right. Open houses, whatever. So it's more like an old school service first agent centric model, rather than the break it apart into, Ted takes it from here to there, and then Mary takes it from, another step of the way. Not that there's anything wrong with that model. It just doesn't work for me.
Right. I actually approach it the same way. I'm in the industry, they call it the rainmaker agent. I've got one assistant. I've got my wife, who's my business partner and broker, and then I have one assistant. And so, you're working with me, and I'm big on the service too. Occasionally, I may have my assistant, Zach Randall. He may, take a showing for me if I'm out of town.
The filling in around it.
Yeah. Helps me out with what I need, if I can't be in two places at one time. But for the most part, my clients are, calling me, talking to me. I'm the one negotiating with them. I'm the one coming to see them. I'm the one, doing everything. And so I'm always curious about people that have there's a lot of growth of teams and how that works for people. Because as of this point, I've been doing, I'm maybe a little bit of a control freak. I don't want to give up because I know how I treat my clients. I want my clients treated the way I want them treated. Other agents say things differently, word things differently than I might word them, and all that stuff is important to me. I want to make sure that my clients get the right experience.
Well, it's interesting. Let me just speak to that for a second. Is like what I see is that the teams are really more or less a marketing gimmick. Right. It's aggregating volume under one person. Look at me. I sold $300 million. Well, right. Horse pucky, right? Like what you did is you have 30 people who each sold 10 million, which is great production per person. Don't get me wrong, but you didn't sell 300 million houses yourself. Right. But you're acting as if, and you hear I don't know if they do radio advertising out there. Rich can probably talk about this. I almost throw up every time I hear a radio spot on about real estate with the abject lie of like, I sell houses faster than anybody else. Yeah, we get a higher price than everybody else. And then you look at their data and you're like, wait a second, the market average is 98.5% sales price to list price. And yours is 96. Right. And if you your failure rate of failure to sell houses is like 35% of the time you fail to sell a house where it becomes withdrawn or, taken off the market or whatever. So the team thing is really more, because I've been a broker, I've owned franchise, I've, been in the Remax world, all that stuff, is the reality is that there's not enough money in the model for the broker really to provide anything more than window dressing service to the agent community. And so what the teams are doing is they're exploiting the gap of actually being a sales coach for the individual agent. And so you take an underperforming salesperson who's sort of adrift in the normal broker model of desk phone, get out of my way, you're on the own, that kind of like old school thing. Yep. To like, okay, you're going to sit in my model. You are going to make your 25 phone calls a day. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And then they just grind it out to the point where they get some success, which is fine
for some people.
But it doesn't work to like for a Matt or a Dave who's like, wait a second, I'm doing, I'm selling 40, 50 houses a year or whatever you're doing. I don't need somebody to micromanage me. So each to their own. I don't think it's going to take over real estate. I think teams are going to proliferate. And then Keller Williams' model now is they have this like enterprise expansion system where they're trying to get groups and teams to expand to other market centers. So like Matt in Nebraska, or I'm going to open an office, a team in Alexandria, Virginia, which is like a whole different thing. Cause I think there's a lot of sort of like, if you're in two marketplaces and you're working for different brokerages, is that collusion? You know what I mean? Are you sharing information amongst brokers? So there's all these sort of like things that I don't know if everybody's thought through all the way.
Right.
So when I hear these things, I'm like, that sounds cool. I'm glad that's an opportunity for somebody else. I'm going to just keep taking care of my clients and just be a small guy, you know?
Well, you know, it's funny. So much of in these issues are almost identical in mortgage. I mean, you see, you know, the such and such team, and we closed, you know, $300 million worth of loans last year. Well, no, you didn't, Jim Smith, because there's only 24 hours in a day, and that's physically impossible. So, Jim, your name may have been the loan officer on it, but you got 25 loan officers, junior LOs, actually schlepping through all that stuff.
Right.
And Jim, you don't know a single client there. Perfect model for somebody, but you know, same kind of thing. But what I think what's intriguing in that, and what you just talked about, is in teams, in a lot of these things, is you run into the potential for compliance issues, right? And that's germane only really to the agent or the
and from a broker perspective, I can assure you that compliance and control is not usually like the bailiwick of the broker, right?
Right.
Like they have a hard time just managing the flat file without any exotic nuances to it.
Right.
But now you bring into these things and you're telling me, okay, so Rich works on Dave's team. Well, is Rich an independent contractor working for the brokerage, or is Rich really a W-2 non-exempt employee working for Dave? Because if I'm managing your day, if I'm requiring your time and what you're specifically doing,
right,
which most teams are, then by default you should be a W-2 employee,
right,
which then makes the question of, are you really authorized to represent the brokerage 2 steps away? You know, so it's like there's all this murky stuff around it. Because I didn't get in the business to make $1 million. I got in the business because I watched the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and I was like, wow, that would be so cool to impact people's lives and like help them find a little piece of the planet to own and have a house and all that hokey stuff, which speaks to me as a human being, which is why I do what I do.
Yep.
So, but I could go on all day about that. So that's a hot button for me. It's just like the shenanigans of, hey, look at me, I sold so many houses. It's like, really? Did you?
Right.
Where's the facts?
Yeah.
So process-wise, just, you know, speaking from the lender side of things, the way this whole thing happens, I mean, you guys know, but for anybody out there, you know, you go to Dave or to Matt, they're your agent, they're representing you, either on the buy or the sell side of things, and the lender, you know, orders the appraiser on behalf of the buyer. And the way that happens, go back 10 years, I would call up Anthony Appraisers, call up Mike McNaughty, my good friend. Hey, Mike, you know, I got a deal 123 Main Street for Dave. I think the value, you know, our contract price is $750. You know, quick comps. I think it's going to be good. Tell me what you think. Can you get out there in the next 3 to 5 days? Boom, boom, boom. Mike,
right.
Yeah, sure, good. You know, all that kind of stuff. All kinds of problems happened historically with that, where some, you know, ding dong who was doing my job would try to throw pressure on Mike to say, we really needed to appraise at $850, and it would be great if that would happen. I'll throw you an extra $100 if you can get out there faster, and then you know, we'll make sure that you get all of our business going forward. So because of that kind of, you know, the shenanigans associated with that, new laws went into place that really shut that whole thing down. So now when an appraisal is ordered, if you're out there and you're on the sell side of something, you're like, why is the appraiser taking so long? I have to go to what's called an appraisal management company now.
Right.
Basically throw the order over the fence. I think it's going to go into a rotation of appraisers or appraisal companies that we've selected, but we can't have direct interaction with. So we kind of can make up the pool of appraisers that we get, because the quality is an issue. You know, do I get Jim? Do I get Joe? Do I get Sue? Or do I get Manny, you know, Larry, Moe, and Curly? If I get Larry, Moe, and Curly, the whole thing's a big fat question mark. If I get Sue, Jim, and Mike, I think I'm pretty good. So I try to put Sue, Jim, and Mike in the pool. Mm-hmm. Then they have to accept the order. So what used to be a 3-minute phone call is now, you know, upwards of, you know, 3 hours just to get the order accepted. And then they've got to get it into their schedule. I cannot call by law to find out directly as the loan officer what the status is. A processor can call. One of you guys can call to find out. But if I call, I'm going to jail. So I don't call.
Don't do that.
yeah, it's kind of not cool.
That would make it hard to do the show, Rich.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You have to call in, no video.
yeah, I'd be a true subject matter expert, right? You know, I'd be on one of these phones, be like banging on the glass.
Well, the trend is that we're moving away from appraisals, even it being part of the process
Yes.
from a lender perspective, because with the algorithms for what the market value is, et cetera. It's funny, there's a service called housecanary.com, which we started using, which has a really great algorithm for projecting what the market value is. And they use some predictive analytics to sort of forecast where things are going. And so what I did is I was like, so they provide big data to, lending institutions for the back end compliance value. And then they also have a appraisal tool for appraisers. And then you can also subscribe just to the report. So we just do the report thing. So I went back and I looked at the last 20 sales that we had, the last 20 appraised values that we had, and I stuck them in. And I'm not talking accurate. I'm talking about like within $50 of where the appraised. So what that tells me is that two things are happening. One, appraisers are probably using automated tools that are doing 90% of the job. Because let's face it, there's not a lot of profit in appraisals.
No.
So they're using these automated tools, and then they're doing the quick justifications and putting a little bit more icing on it to get it done. So I think what's going to happen is the lenders, Fannie, Freddie, et cetera, are going to say, listen, we don't need an appraisal because we can score it. And as long as it's within this acceptable score range, we don't require an appraisal. But the consumer, so some people say, appraisers are going to go out of business. I don't think so. I think it's going to wind up being appraisers are going to be a consumer service that a buyer will say, hey, do you want to have an appraisal done? And then that'll let the appraisers bring a customer service component back into it of, you want it in 5 days, here's the price. You want it in 2 days, you want me to do this, that, and the other thing, I can do all these other things. I just think that's probably going to happen. When it happens, I don't know. But I think that's probably coming at some point in the relatively near future.
I would agree with that. And there's already language and mechanics in place at both Fannie and Freddie that are kind of preemptively getting us down that path. I mean, the number of automated checks that go into the scoring of an appraisal are there already. So I think it's a matter of certainly short years, if not long months, before we're there, which will be interesting. It'll be very interesting. Stick with me for one quick second. I'm pausing.
Is it? It does. You can tell that something was going on there.
We're back.
Welcome back, everybody.
That worked.
Right.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. All right. So yeah, appraisal is a really, really funky thing. And where it's going, it's less about, what Zillow's doing, and it's more about what big data is doing, as Dave touched on. So, the industry as a whole is going to feel that over time. And so it's going to be, the consumer experience will change for sure. And then our experience without doubt will, but
for sure.
When you guys jump, you had the next topic to pull
Yeah,
from.
Dave, you mentioned you did a little research last night on home affordability, specifically to your market, but maybe also nationwide. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen is that days on market has really, picked up as we're in this buyer pivot period where in our local market, the second half of the year is much slower in terms of sales, et cetera. So last night I was thinking all right, let me go back over a 2-year period, back to 2015, and just kind of look at what's happened in a specific sort of example. Let's say that there's Bob and Betty. They want to buy in Delray, which is a neighborhood in Alexandria. So just to sort of paint the picture, it's super cool, urban, villagey, hip spot. You can walk to shopping and restaurants and bars and super kid friendly and all this kind of stuff. So in that area, there's a neighborhood called Warwick Village. So these are really small townhouses, but they're really popular. So in 2015, in the June to July time period in 2015, the price was $530 to $537, and interest rates were 3.98%. So projecting a principal and interest payment, that's $2,019 to $2,046 a month, not including taxes and all the rest of it, assuming a 20% down payment. So then looking the next year in 2016, same time period, the price went to $540 to $565, but God bless Brexit, right? Rates went down to 3.57. So we had this price increase, but it was hidden it didn't cause an affordability issue because interest rates had come down. And so the payment was 1956 to 2047, really no payment shock whatsoever. Higher prices didn't cost more.
Right.
Then in 2017, hold on to your hats, right? The price went to 579 to 615. And the rate went back up to 3.9%. So now the payment is now 2184 to 2320. So that's about an 11 to 13.5% bump higher, which basically is the equivalent of about $60,000 in mortgage amount or $75,000 of purchase price ability. So now what happens is you say, wait a second. So if I was payment sensitive, if I actually had a fixed budget, right, I can no longer afford this neighborhood. And so where they wind up buying doesn't sound like a long way away. It's like 2 miles, 3 miles by the way the bird flies. But instead of being in a super cool, hip, urban neighborhood, villagey community kind of thing where everybody wants to be, now they're along like the super highway with train tracks and all the rest of the stuff because they had to move out of where they want to go. So that's kind of the issue that I think we're seeing is buyers are saying, wait a sec, I can no longer afford what I want. And so now we have this tug of war between buyers and sellers of either sellers are going to have to bring prices back down or buyers are going to have to get a new religion and say, okay, so is West Springfield okay? Or where am I going with my budget? And so that's sort of a turmoil, and you can imagine the war going on in these consumers' heads of, well, is it worth it to spend the extra $400 or $500 a month? And then you see on the news all the time, like, well, we've had real wage increases and stuff like that, but yeah, modestly so. And I think anybody who has experienced a wage increase recently would say that the cost of health insurance has probably eaten up any sort of effective wage increase. So your net income is relatively the same. So it's really sort of interesting. So then I went back and said, okay, so we have higher rates now than we did last year. Same relative rates that it was 2 years ago. But if you have a rate increase of 0.5%, then that costs you about 5% in terms of like purchasability.
Right.
And then if you have a 5% price increase along with a 0.5% rate increase, now you're talking about a 10% difference. And so to put that in context, like you go out and you look at a $800,000 house and people are saying, wait a second, this house to me feels like it should be $720,000. And the underlying reason for that is because that would bring that payment back in line of where they think it should be. And that's the problem with housing affordability, which is what we were talking about, Rich, earlier about the Fannie Mae Home Price Sentiment Index, where it's dropping, that sellers don't think it's a good time to sell. And you go, wait a second, if prices are up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, and there's relatively limited supply, why isn't it a good time to sell? It's because there's no replacement house, right? It's where am I going, right? Sure, I can sell my house for, a good number, but the house that I really want to buy is that much more expensive because rates are higher and that price is higher. So therefore, why go from a good position to a bad position? So I think what's going to happen as a result of this housing affordability issue we're having right now is we're going to see supply of houses come down drastically in the next couple of months because people are going to fail to sell and there's not going to be as many new sellers coming into the market, which will bring our inventory down to like anemic levels in November and December. And then January will take off like a rocket again and we'll probably pick up another 5, 6% in market value for these early adopter buyers, which is interesting because buried in, I think it was CoreLogic's Loan Performance Insights. They were talking about the percentages of people who report that they have significantly higher income or something like that, that it was like 7% or 10% of the people out there feel like they're making significantly more money. Well, I think these are the people that come out early in the year, the people that got the pay raise or they just got married and now they have 2 incomes rather than 1 income. And those are the people that sort of like are those early adopters in the spring, which drive those prices higher, at least in our local market.
I would agree with that. And I mentioned to Matt a couple of weeks ago that I actually did a look back on my entire client base, and like you guys, I'm a refer and repeat. That I don't buy leads. And my clients are my clients, and I've got that group of people that I kind of work with, and I love having new people, but it's really, over and over again, which is fantastic. But that group, and you look at, I can just call it a segment really of maybe I wouldn't necessarily call them first-time home buyers, but first times in move-ups, the cost of the homes in that group has gone dramatically higher since '02, without question, and that's obvious. But real wage growth within that power band has been nearly flatline, maybe up 5%. So that type of a buyer is experiencing exactly what you're talking about, and those that are doing better are the move-ups, right? Or they're the move-outs and move-ons. So it is fascinating that real wage growth, like actual real, not, at least in my data pool, has not seen that growth.
Because real estate for the last, so from 2008 to 2015 felt cheap, right? Like these are good deals. Look, these are good prices. I think we're beyond that, at least in our local marketplace. It'd be interesting to hear how Matt's local marketplace is functioning. But I think we're at the point now where real estate feels expensive again.
Does. Yeah.
And therefore, I think people are pumping the brakes, especially the higher up you go in the price bands. Like for example, in our local marketplace, over $1 million homes, there's over which sounds super expensive from a nationwide perspective, but locally, it's a nice house, but it's not like a mega mansion or anything like that. There's over an 8-month supply of homes in that price band. But if you're talking about like a $350,000 to $400,000 house, there's probably less than a month supply. So it's a great move up market, but you have to have that income that makes it make sense to move up. And there's sort of this lost generation of people. Like, I think I'm in that lost generation because I bought my, big house in 2005, 2006, market caved on it. And so it's like, these people are like, I'm not moving anywhere. I'm just happy to be relatively break even. The chances of trying to get one of these people that suffered that mega meltdown to say, yeah, let's buy another big house at potentially the high end of the market, there's not a lot of appetite for that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But Matt, in your local market, do you feel like real estate feels affordable, or are you guys feeling like it looks expensive in the minds of the consumers?
Yeah, no, we've had 3 straight years of price increases and a shortage of homes. And I've been telling my clients a couple of years ago, I was more like, any moment now we're going to have a whole bunch of houses pop on the market. Just hang tight, especially trying to help some buyers, and it just hasn't happened. 15, 16, and now 17. So we definitely have that where people are going, I think I'm going to wait because prices have just crept up the last 3 years in a row. And I don't see them changing because we still have this historically low inventory. And I'm sure we'll have the same thing next spring. And I think our biggest thing here, when I talk to sellers that have thought about selling and moving up, they are not confident they can find where they want to be. Like, it's not available. They can't buy a house in the country club neighborhood that they want to be in, or in Wilderness Ridge or Firethorn or whatever. There are just no houses on the market, so they can't go where they want to go.
Right. So what we're seeing is people who are moving out, retiring, they want to sell, or people who have had this significant family income bump where, like, just married, or you got a major promotion or relocating in for a job. But you don't really see much of that, like, little move up, where I'm selling my $600,000 house and buying a $700,000 house. That happens, but it's pretty rare. It's more I'm selling my $600,000 house and I'm buying $1 million, or I'm selling my $350,000 townhouse and I'm buying a $600,000 house. It's that leapfrog effect, which is interesting because then you say, well, where's the inventory going to come from? Right? Like, I don't think, because of the job market is so strong and people feel really secure in their jobs, I don't think we're going to see distress sales really coming into the market. We're not going to have that traditional move up buyer. So again, supply is going to be limited. And that when the buyers are out, which in our market is the first half of the year, then that's when you get that 5, 6, 7, 8% run up in prices. And then it cools back down a little bit in the second half of the year, and you wind up with that year 4.5%, 5% increase. Which should be sustainable, right? As long as interest rates stay low. But I do think it'd be interesting, Rich, your perspective as a mortgage lender on it is if interest rates break through and they go to 5, is going to put a real wet blanket on the party for housing values. And I think we would see a significant reduction, especially if when the Fed's trying to unwind that mortgage-backed security position, who's buying all those things. And so where the yield's going to go and where the price is going to go. And if we break up to that 5% or through 5%, it's going to be a real shock to the system.
But if we get to 5%, what that's going to mean from a house price perspective is absolutely the brakes are going to be pumped. If anything, we're going to go into a pretty heavy power slide. Okay. And it's not necessarily bad or wrong. It just is. And what that would mean relative to, I think, an average home price, certainly in our area, 5% was about 2004, 2003 from an interest rate perspective, just to put that in context. And then when things went south, we were still pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping and growing. Really, 5.5 was kind of that magic number. If the big refi market in 03, 04, 5.5 was like, oh. And then, things got a little bit weird and wonky in 05. And that's really, in my opinion, is when the market turned was actually called, I would say it was probably June of 05. Nobody knows. I mean, the canaries in the coal mine were really starting to fall at that point, and then 06, 07. But then we crept up over 6, 7% in certain circumstances. But typically 6%, 6.5 was where interest rates were. And what that meant is we had this, a lot of fake loans turned values way up high. And then we got back to a reality, and that's where we saw, a $500,000 house was right priced back down to $325 or $350. So what does it mean today for a $500,000 house that you can get a rate at 3 7/8 or 3 3/4 for on a 30-year fixed? If that goes up to 5%, that $500,000 house is going to be probably a $400,000 house. Okay, just because with that, there won't be wage growth necessarily at the same rate with those interest rate climbs. We need, from a broader economy perspective, to see that kind of pump in interest rates. Without it, we're going to end up as Japan has ended up with this kind of stagflation forever, right? So Japan has been at or near zero economic growth for the better part of 20, 25 years, right? There's a zero interest rate policy in place. And to Dave's point, as the Fed begins what's called this unwind of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, where they begin to sell off their holdings, which the Fed has artificially propped up or suppressed interest rates, however you want to term it, as that unfolds, China's been one of our biggest purchasers of securities and so on and so forth. Are the institutional investors in the United States actually going to really buy it, kind of come in and purchase at high levels? And if so, to do that, they're going to demand a higher return. So they demand a higher return. That means higher interest rates. So my feeling is that certainly over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, I do think that we need real growth. I don't know that we'll get it, though. So
time will tell.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's more the shock to the system that creates the opportunity, right? When interest rates break through to another level, everybody has to get used to it. And so when rates are steady, then buyers have predictability in terms of I can think about this for 3 or 4 months. When rates start to go up, then you get the surge of buyers into the market, which even with higher rates, temporarily you may have higher prices as people surge into the market. But then it settles down, and then the new buyer walks in and says, wait a second, I didn't sign up for an extra $500, $600 a month in this home buying experience. So I got to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And so there's the surge, and then there's this leveling out, and then everything's going to sort of shake out and sort of onto a new normal. That to me is where I feel like we're at right now, is where we're at interest rates of 4%. We've had a nice bump in price values, and now we're into this settling out of this is going to be the new normal, or are we going to make a change? It's probably going to be the new normal, but it's probably going to take a couple months to settle that out. And that's why once we get back to January, we'll probably resume price increases without there being some sort of shock to the system, such as the stock market not collapsing, but like a 20% sell off in the stock market, or significant interest rate bump or something like that.
Yeah. And if those things happen, or rather the right way to say it is when those things happen, I agree. it just becomes, you're a fighter in the fight, and you get that shot to the nose, you look down, you're bleeding, you're like, oh crap, the adrenaline rush of it. And then you look up and you figure out, well, I'm still standing, so let's keep going.
Because I've always thought the demand for housing, you can tamper it down for a little bit, but you can't stop it, right?
No.
Because the cycle of life drives buyer demand. So I get out of college, or I get my first job, and then I get a promotion, I get married, we have a kid, we have 2 kids, we have 3 kids, we get divorced, we die, whatever it's going to be, right? That cycle of life marches on, whether the interest rate's 6% or 4%. If I've got 6 kids and I'm living in a 3-bedroom townhouse, I'm moving at some point, right? I'm moving further out. I'm moving west, east, whatever. I'm going to figure that situation out. If my dad breaks the hip and he's got to live with us and we need to put an addition on, we're going to put the addition on. It might cost more, but that cycle of life moves on. If you get divorced, you're selling the house, right?
Want to or not.
When that worker bees, like if you lose your job and you only have one income fueling the household, that's an economic disaster. Yeah, and you can only hold on so long. But if you've got like net 10 years reserves in the bank, you're like, this is an interruption. This is an inconvenience.
This is inconvenient.
This is inconvenient, but it's not a disaster. And therefore we don't have to fire sell the house and all that stuff. Yeah. And so the more premium communities tend to have those economically advantaged homeowners. So therefore there's no fire sale prices coming out of there. But it'd be interesting for your next show. It'd be interesting to talk about or learn about sort of that shadow inventory that may be coming with all those HELOC loans that were 10-year interest only that are now coming to be like a 20-year AM at current market rates, and what the payment factors are, and like whether or not that'll force some of those marginal homes into like either I got to sell my house now or potentially into short sales or foreclosures. That might be another segment to look at.
It's out there. It's definitely out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been talking to a fair number of those folks right now, looking to do something with that, but their values, interesting values aren't there. But yeah.
Well, that's Dave Zadaracki, 703-499-9446.
All right. Shameless plug number one.
For all those Rich Hayden clients that work with other real estate agents, call me.
Yep.
Beautiful. That is going to be the thumbnail of the show right there. So with that, I think we're starting to creep on the clock. I know everybody's got a full day ahead. Any closing parting remarks, Dave, you want to share with everybody other than the awesome plug that was right there? No,
really enjoyed, Matt, meeting you. Rich, nice to catch up. I mean, really enjoy the format. I think it's really helpful to get the word out of what's really going on, because the media is generally 6 months behind. They're reporting what happened in the past tense, but there's not much forward looking. This is what's happening in the trenches, and this is where the market is going. So I think that's probably helpful to get that word out. Cool.
Dave, I just want to say thanks. You were amazing. I learned a ton today, that's part of the goal, is that we all learn a little bit. So thanks for your time this morning and coming on, talking to us.
Yeah. Good times. Thanks, guys.
You bet, buddy. Thank you.
See you guys. All right. Peace out.
See ya.